Imagine this. You're standing before a woman who stirs something in you, not just desire but possibility. The air between you is charged with quiet potential. A few words are exchanged, light, trivial, polite. Then suddenly, silence. Your mind goes blank. You feel the void open like a quiet abyss between two breaths. Out of instinct, you reach for the first safe line that comes to mind, the old familiar crutch. "So, what do you do in your free time?" She smiles, kind, polite, but in her eyes something fades. A flicker that was curiosity moments ago becomes courtesy now. That's the moment you lose her, though you may not understand it yet. Because it wasn't your words that failed you. It was your predictability. A man who tries to fill every empty second with noise is not perceived as confident. He is seen as afraid. Afraid of silence, afraid of judgment, afraid of himself. The irony is brutal. The harder you try to sound interesting, the less interesting you become. Why? Because people aren't drawn to what they can instantly understand. They are drawn to mystery. And when you fill every gap with explanations, jokes, and rehearsed stories, you give her the full map too soon. There's nothing left to explore. The tragedy of most men is not that they have nothing to say, it is that they cannot stand saying nothing. They fear silence because silence feels like exposure. It's in that stillness that your presence, your composure, your inner world, or your lack of it, becomes visible. But here's the truth, no one tells you. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is weight. When used with intent, it becomes a gravitational force. Today, you are going to learn a new way to move. A way inspired by the most calculating magnetic minds in history. The kind of men who didn't seek attention, but commanded it. The kind of men who turned stillness into power. Because seduction, real seduction, is not about words. It's about energy. It's not about telling stories, but about holding space. Most men try to impress. They display, they explain, they perform. They speak as if attraction can be built from adjectives. But the moment you try to prove your value, you announce its absence. A man who has to justify himself has already surrendered his mystery. True magnetism isn't about convincing anyone you're valuable. It's about embodying the calm certainty that you don't need to convince anyone. That quiet self-possession, that lack of performance, creates its own orbit. Think of it this way. When someone talks too much about themselves, when they rush to fill silence with trivia, what do you feel? You feel their insecurity disguised as enthusiasm. You feel the nervous edge behind the smile. You feel the hidden plea. Please like me. And no matter how confident the words sound, that undertone kills intrigue. Because nothing is more transparent than a man who's trying too hard to be understood. Attraction doesn't bloom from abundance. It blooms from scarcity. It doesn't come from clarity. It comes from curiosity. The less you give, the more the mind must imagine. That's why silence, when mastered, becomes your greatest ally. It turns the conversation into a labyrinth, a place she gets lost in, not because you confuse her, but because you don't give her every answer. You let her wonder. Mystery isn't manipulation. It's literacy and attention. It's understanding the primal truth that the unknown seduces. The moment a person thinks they've fully seen you, their curiosity dies. The moment they realize there is something they can't quite grasp, something slightly withheld, their mind stays hooked. Most people run from tension. They fear the awkward pause, the unanswered question, the quiet gaze. But tension is the current of attraction. No tension, no current. The art lies not in dissolving that current, but in riding it. So why does silence scare us? Because in silence there's no place to hide. You can't rely on humor or charm. You can't distract with noise. The other person sees straight through, into your composure, your stillness, or your lack of both. Yet if you learn to relax inside that void, it transforms from threat to weapon. A man who can hold silence without flinching sends one message: I am at home within myself. That is the essence of magnetism. If your silence makes you uneasy, your words will sound cheap. If your silence feels grounded, your words will sound expensive. And women, perceptive, intuitive, almost psychic when it comes to tone, sense that instantly. Cheap words chase. Expensive words choose. Now let's step deeper. Subtle provocation, not rudeness, not arrogance, is your next instrument. The kind that invites play rather than offense. The kind that says without words, "Show me who you are." Most men throw compliments like confetti, hoping one will stick. But the more you praise without precision, the less value your attention carries. True provocation is selective. It creates friction, a slight challenge that wakes her up. You might smile, delay your response, tilt your head instead of nodding, answer a question with a question that reveals you're evaluating too. That small unpredictability breaks the script she's used to. It reminds her she's not the only one with power. The human mind hates open loops. When you leave a void, it must fill it. When you create ambiguity, it craves resolution. That's the psychology of intrigue. Leave an unanswered question, and you create a gravitational pull. The key is restraint. You offer crumbs, never banquets. Each phrase must carry weight. Each silence must invite tension. Speak only when your words can outvalue your silence. When you talk too much, you dilute yourself. When you talk with precision, you concentrate your energy. You become unforgettable not through your words, but through the echo that follows them. A quiet man who observes and reveals only what's necessary feels dangerous. Not because he threatens, but because he can't be read. She doesn't know if he's impressed or indifferent, if he's testing or admiring. That ambiguity creates psychological tension. It's the tension that fuels attraction. At that moment, the roles reverse. She starts performing. She begins to prove herself, not because you demanded it, but because your calm detachment pulled it out of her. You flip the board without saying a word. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is strategy. Mystery is not a mask, it's a mirror. Provocation is not cruelty. It's curiosity sharpened into art. Attraction doesn't emerge from being understood. It grows from being wondered about. The unknown always weighs more than the known. The unspoken lingers longer than the spoken. Conversation, at its highest form, is not an exchange of facts. It's an invisible pulse, a current of energy between two nervous systems. It's not about the content, it's about the tension beneath the content. That's why two men can say the same words and create completely different reactions. Because meaning isn't in the phrase, it's in the presence behind it. Most men speak defensively, to avoid silence, to fill space, to avoid being misjudged. But a man who isn't afraid of silence speaks like every word costs him something. And that price, that restraint, gives each word value. Picture this. You're in a conversation, and instead of rushing to fill each pause, you let the air breathe. You look, observe, take a slow breath, answer calmly. You give her space to feel your presence before you speak. That composure is magnetic, because composure communicates what no words can. I don't need to chase this moment. And the paradox is this: the less you chase connection, the more connection chases you. Presence is not posture. It's not about puffing your chest or holding your chin higher than others. Presence is a byproduct of what's happening inside you, the stillness you carry when you no longer need to prove, rush, or please. When you walk into a room and your energy doesn't flinch, people feel it before you speak. They feel it in your pacing, in the way your eyes land on things, in how your voice never strains to be heard. Presence is a silent declaration. I belong here without permission. A man with presence understands that attention is currency. He spends it sparingly. He doesn't give it to everyone. He doesn't scatter it like loose change. He observes before investing, and that selectivity becomes his signal of worth. You see, the human mind equates rarity with value. What's easily available rarely feels precious. That's why a man who offers his focus to everyone loses its power. But a man who observes first, who filters, who decides who earns his curiosity, becomes an event in any room. And that right there is where attraction begins. Not with pursuit, but with discernment. Most men believe the key to attraction lies in being agreeable. They think connection is built by mirroring, by matching, by nodding, by eagerly responding to every cue. But what they don't realize is that relentless agreement feels hollow. It doesn't create tension, it dissolves it. Attraction requires polarity. Two magnetic fields must oppose, not overlap. You can't generate electricity from sameness. This is where your restraint becomes your edge. Silence creates polarity. Pauses generate charge. The moment you stop trying to mirror every emotion, you allow your counterpart to feel the distance. Not emotional distance, but psychological space. That space is sacred. It's the stage on which curiosity dances. Let's talk about composure under pressure, the hallmark of psychological gravity. When she speaks, don't rush to respond. Don't interrupt. Don't nod excessively as though seeking points for listening. Hold still. Let your expression say, "I'm weighing this." When she finishes, count one breath, then another. 2 beats of stillness. You'll be amazed how often she continues speaking, revealing more, deepening the thought, because your silence created permission. That's the paradox of real listening. The less you react, the more people reveal. But this isn't passive silence. It's engaged stillness. Your attention must be alive, not vacant. You're not zoning out, you're zooming in. Every micro-expression, every word choice, every flicker of uncertainty, you read them like a code. This is what separates quiet confidence from emptiness. Quiet confidence sees. Observation is your hidden weapon. While she talks, you're not just absorbing content, you're studying rhythm. You notice how her tone shifts when she speaks of something real versus something rehearsed. You notice how her body relaxes when she forgets to perform. You store every signal without needing to announce that you've noticed. And when you finally speak, your words cut through noise because they carry evidence of perception. For example, she might tell a story about changing careers, expecting the usual reaction, a compliment, a question about logistics. But you lean back slightly, tilt your head, and say quietly, "You sound like someone who decided fear had too much authority." Then silence. You've just reframed her story from a surface narrative into a value statement, from "I changed jobs" to "I changed relationship with fear." You didn't just listen, you understood. That's intimacy born from observation, not performance. Let's talk about status calibration. Real status has nothing to do with money or fame. It's measured by reactivity. The higher your emotional self-regulation, the higher your perceived status. Watch 2 people in disagreement. The one who gets louder loses status. The one who grows quieter gains it. The one who needs to be understood loses control. The one who can let misunderstanding hang in the air owns the frame. To hold your status quietly is to demonstrate that the external world doesn't need to dictate your internal state. That's what people crave, someone who wants to be pulled by every gust of emotion. When you carry this kind of still gravity, every gesture magnifies. A subtle smile becomes a statement. A pause becomes suspense. A single look can shift the dynamic. If she teases you, don't rush to defend or retaliate. Appreciate the craftsmanship of the tease. Smile as if you caught the artistry behind it. That response, calm, amused, unbothered, communicates more strength than any witty comeback ever could. Then pivot. Always pivot toward substance. "Careful," you might say with an amused tone. "You're about to convince me you debate for sport." You acknowledged her sharpness, displayed composure, and guided the interaction back to depth, without competing. That's what real power looks like. Let's explore nonchalance. Nonchalance isn't coldness, it's pressurelessness. It's what happens when you remove the outcome from the equation. The more outcome you attach to a moment, the more you need something from it, the heavier your presence feels. Heavy energy kills intrigue. Light energy pulls. Nonchalance is lightness without disinterest. You care, but you don't cling. You engage, but you don't lean forward. You remain invested in the process, detached from the result. Here's the formula. Presence plus nonchalance plus charisma. A man who can be fully present without gripping the moment becomes magnetic. Because most people are either detached or desperate. Almost no one can do both at once. This is why you never chase energy. You match it when it's aligned, and when it isn't, you step back without resentment. Detachment isn't withdrawal, it's control of investment. Now let's dissect conversation itself. The biggest mistake men make is turning dialogue into interrogation. They bombard with predictable questions. What do you do? Where are you from? How long have you lived here? Each of these questions forces her to repeat rehearsed scripts, social autopilot. And nothing kills energy faster than familiarity. Instead, replace questions with invitations. Don't ask for information. Invite revelation. You might say, "You look like someone who finishes what you start," and then pause. She'll either correct you, confirm you, or play with it. Each response reveals more than any direct question could. That's because invitations are open doors, not interrogations. They create a space where she chooses to step forward. Choice multiplies investment. And when you speak, avoid asking for validation. Avoid long explanations. Speak in lines, not paragraphs. Precision is power. The more you talk, said the strategist, the more you reveal your position. Every unnecessary word exposes what you fear, what you need, what you're trying to hide. The less you speak, the more people must guess. And guessing keeps them engaged. Let's discuss boundaries, because mystery without boundaries dissolves into confusion. A man without boundaries is not intriguing. He's chaotic. His energy leaks in every direction because he hasn't learned to hold it. Boundaries are quiet declarations of value. You don't announce them, you embody them. If she's late, you don't scold, you compress. I keep small promises tight, you say calmly. Then you move on. No lecture, no resentment, just clarity wrapped in calm. That calmness is everything. It's warm steel, strong enough to hold shape, soft enough to touch. A man who combines boundaries with warmth becomes rare. Most men are either too rigid or too yielding. The balance, compassionate but firm, radiates both safety and challenge. A woman can rest in it and rise to it at once. That's why restraint isn't suppression, it's containment. The energy you don't spill becomes gravity. Next, let's talk about tempo. Tempo is how you control the emotional rhythm of the interaction. Your speech, your gestures, your micro-pauses, they're all part of your music. Most people speak too fast because they're afraid of losing attention. But the faster you speak, the more you chase. The slower you move, the more you anchor. Here's a rule. Move one beat slower than the world. When she speeds up, you slow down. When she raises volume, you lower yours. The slower rhythm always sets the emotional temperature. It's the same principle martial artists use, control by tempo, not force. And when the moment grows charged, when the air thickens and silence hovers, Don'd break it. Let it live. Let her feel it. That's where the real conversation begins, not in words, but in the pulse of what remains unspoken. Remember this. Tension is not the enemy. Tension is the instrument. It's the string that vibrates to make the music of attraction. You don't cut the string, you learn to play it. Mastery, vulnerability, and the art of leaving traces will complete the rewrite, diving into how to end moments with strength, how to manage disclosure and vulnerability, and how to embody magnetism beyond performance. Most men chase mastery as though it's a finish line, a point of completion, a trophy, a certainty. But mastery isn't a destination, it's a disappearance. It's the point where the act and the actor dissolve into one. When you truly embody composure, you no longer try to be calm, you simply are. When you understand silence, you no longer withhold words, you speak only what's necessary. When you've studied restraint, you no longer pretend to be mysterious, you just move with a deliberate absence of excess. Mastery is not addition, it's subtraction. It's removing everything that dilutes your essence. Every unnecessary word, gesture, and emotional flair, all of it clouds your clarity. When you strip them away, what remains isn't emptiness, it's density. People often mistake silence for lack of substance, but silence, when born from awareness, becomes pressure. It's what makes others adjust their tone, their posture, their approach. Because silence carries self-assurance, the quiet proof that you don't fear invisibility. To fear invisibility is to crave validation. To embrace it is to command attention. When you stop fighting for the spotlight, you become the gravity that pulls it. This is the paradox of the composed man. The more he releases control, the more control he gains. Because he no longer fights to win energy, he governs it. Let's talk about vulnerability, the most misunderstood aspect of strength. Vulnerability is not confession. It's not emotional exhibitionism. It's the willingness to be seen without flinching. There's no magnetism in overexposure, but there's immense power in transparency without self-pity. When you share something real, a loss, a doubt, a desire, without dramatizing it, it lands with truth instead of tension. You don't hand someone your wounds to heal. You show them your scars to connect. People respond to earned vulnerability, the kind that comes from reflection, not desperation. Earned vulnerability is when you can articulate your story with clarity and composure, not chaos. It's not about seeking empathy. It's about sharing understanding. When you reveal a truth with that kind of control, it changes the temperature of the room. It disarms defensiveness. It turns curiosity into intimacy. And it only works if your foundation is already strong. Vulnerability without backbone collapses into need, but strength without vulnerability calcifies into distance. The art is to blend the two, steel and softness. Steel says, "You can't break me." Softness says, "You don't need to try." Together, they create emotional alchemy, the kind of presence that feels both grounded and alive. Now, let's discuss contrast, because magnetism thrives on it. Without contrast, even the powerful becomes predictable. If you're always calm, people adapt. If you're always detached, they stop chasing. The secret is controlled unpredictability. You must occasionally disrupt your pattern, not to perform, but to remind others that your calm has depth. A man who can switch from stillness to warmth, from mystery to openness, from minimalism to passion, that man becomes impossible to label. And what can't be labeled can't be dismissed. For example, after long moments of composed listening, surprise her with humor. Not loud humor, but the kind that reveals intelligence behind restraint. After showing emotional control, let a moment of sincerity break through. I almost forgot what that kind of excitement feels like. That single line from a man of composure lands like thunder, because contrast creates impact. Imagine a night sky. Stars only matter because of darkness. Without the silence, there's no brilliance. Your restraint is the darkness. Your emotion, when it finally surfaces, becomes the star. Let's talk about exit, the art of leaving traces. Most men ruin their impact by overstaying the moment. They don't know when to leave. They cling, hoping to extract more connection. But the longer you stay, the more the mystery decays. When you sense the energy peaking, when laughter has slowed or silence has reached that perfect tension, end it there. Endings define memory. The last moment frames the entire experience. That's why great films fade before the applause, and great conversations end one heartbeat before comfort. Leave while there's still curiosity. Leave before certainty. Leave a question, not a conclusion. Say something that lingers, not something that closes. Maybe it's as simple as, "I like the way you think." It leaves room for silence. Then you stand, calmly, without hesitation. That moment will replay in her mind longer than 1,000 words ever could, because you gave her space to wonder, and wonder is the soil of attraction. Remember this rule. People don't miss you. They miss how they felt around you. If your energy made them feel steady, curious, challenged, or seen, that's what they crave in your absence. Your mystery isn't about secrets. It's about sensations that can't be easily replaced. That's the essence of leaving traces, emotional fingerprints that outlive presence. Now let's rise a layer deeper. Legacy of character. Everything we've discussed, silence, restraint, observation, composure, is not just social strategy. It's philosophy. It's the art of living with intentional gravity. A man who governs his impulses doesn't just influence rooms. He builds worlds. His stillness becomes contagious. His calm sets tone. His discipline becomes invitation. The world doesn't need more performers. It needs more pillars. People who can stand in silence without collapsing into insecurity. The longer you walk this path, the less you'll need to convince anyone of who you are. Your consistency will speak in whispers louder than others' noise. And paradoxically, the quieter your power becomes, the more others will project mystery onto you. That's not manipulation. It's magnetism born from authenticity. True mystery is not what you hide. It's what others can't quite define. They'll sense there's depth behind your restraint, but they won't know where it ends. And that uncertainty, that bottomless perception, keeps them returning to the thought of you long after you've gone. In a culture that worships exposure, your ability to withhold becomes rebellion, to not explain everything, to not overshare, to not fight to be understood. This is not arrogance. It's art, the art of selective revelation. Reveal only what deepens the moment. Conceal what must mature in silence. Your power doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from being the kind of man who can sit inside the question. Because mastery isn't final, it's perpetual curiosity guided by control. Let me tell you something most men never understand. The reason stillness is magnetic is because it's rare. In a world of noise, to be calm is to be exotic. In a world of rush, to be deliberate is to be dangerous. In a world obsessed with visibility, to remain unseen yet felt. That's sovereignty. So cultivate that inner stillness. Guard it like treasure. Because once you lose it, everything external becomes frantic. Approval, validation, attention. But when you protect it, all of life starts orbiting toward you naturally. You become the unmoving axis around which chaos organizes itself. That's the essence of masculine composure. Not dominance, not control. Containment. You are the container. The vessel that allows the energy around you to take form without collapsing into it. To lead doesn't mean to push. It means to hold space so others can rise inside it. That's true influence, not visible, but undeniable. And as you walk this path, you'll realize something profound. Mystery isn't something you project, it's something you preserve. Every man has it, but most trade it away for attention. They speak too soon. They show too much. They rush to prove what could have been quietly discovered. Resist that temptation. Hold some thoughts unspoken. Hold some glances a second longer. Hold some stories for the right silence. Because the moment you reveal everything, curiosity dies. And curiosity is the only bridge between two souls. So move through the world as a quiet storm, still yet full of unseen voltage. Speak with intention. Pause with purpose. Never compete for attention. Make people compete for your clarity. And when you finally leave, when the night ends, when the moment closes, leave behind something no one else can offer, an aftertaste of peace wrapped in intrigue. Because real mystery isn't about being unreadable. It's about being unforgettable. And that, my friend, is the true art of presence. To be fully seen yet never entirely known. To walk through the noise untouched. To master the quiet so completely that even your silence speaks. That's the essence of masculine magnetism. Not louder, not brighter, but deeper. It's the quiet force that shifts the room. The still water that mirrors truth. The voice that never has to shout to be remembered. Mastery is not about being followed. It's about moving so deliberately that the world aligns itself around your pace. So keep your center. Speak with precision. Be rare enough to intrigue, real enough to connect, and calm enough to endure. Because in the end, power is not noise. It's the sound of nothing, carried with certainty.